Hey, guess what? Everyone feels stupid. Welcome to the first episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Julia Johnson, and this is the Everyone Feels Stupid podcast. First episode, wow. It's been a long time coming, longer than you think. I have probably recorded this episode 5 or so different times, and every time I start editing it and I just regret everything I've said, and I'm like, nope, that's not going to be the first episode. But this time, I'm just committing whatever ends up happening is what the episode's going to be. And, because the podcast doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't. It truly doesn't. I think that's something that I have to work through in a lot of aspects of my life. And, this is going to be a place as more of like a creative outlet than anything else. So why try and force it to be something super like rigid and like that sort of vibe. Like it should just be loose and flowy, and whatever I say is what I say, and we work from there. So yeah. But essentially in this episode, I'm kind of going to talk through like why start a podcast, what like how I came up with the name, what I hope for in the future of it, and like those sorts of things. I did take a bunch of like notes on stuff I wanted to say. Like I filled up an entire notebook page. But yeah, I don't know exactly how this is going to go. I didn't script anything except for the intro, but I have like general things that I want to talk about. So, for just to start off, I figure probably the thing that we should talk about first is why I considered starting a podcast in the first place. So, I had like a few months ago, I had this dream where I hosted like a talk show, podcasty type thing, and it was definitely more like interview style. I couldn't tell you who any of the guests were, but like I definitely had several guests on this podcast, and I just kind of, like I ran I ran my little show. And after I had that dream, I was reminded of this of like a bunch of things in my past because I've had lots of failed like YouTube channels. Like there's lots of channels I've had where I'll post like one or two videos and then I'll completely abandon the channel and give up on it. Which is not going to happen to the podcast. Trust. All right. But I would have like 2, 3 episodes and then of whatever. And then I would just abandon it. I was like, nope. And I was like, I'm older now. I want to do something that's less like random. And like this dream, it came to me and it's like, think of all the things you did in your past. Why don't you just do that again and like actually commit to it this time? So that's the hope with where we're going with that. I was also reminded of a moment. I think I was in, I want to say 3rd grade, and we were playing games in PE class, and the school counselor was there. I don't know why he was there. I think he was just like hanging out. And, but he had, like, we were playing for all my D50 kids, limo. We were playing limo, which is like, for those that don't know, it's kind of dodgeball adjacent. Like it's dodgeball, except you can't walk the ball; you have to like roll the ball, and like but it's still like the same. Like if you get hit with the ball, you're out, like those sorts of things. So it's like it's dodgeball adjacent essentially. And so I had gotten out, and I was off sitting on the side, and the school counselor was like right there next to me, and I just started like commentating on the game. I don't know why, but I just started like talking through it, and I remember him like literally telling me that I would be a good like sports commentator, which at the time like I was like, what are you talking about? I don't care about sports, which now that I'm older, my interests have changed. I do definitely have more of an interest in sports and all of those sorts of things. So I think he was just seeing the future a little bit. But yeah, and I think there's always been like a part of me that's been very interested in like all forms of media. Like when I was little, my ultimate dream was to be like a triple threat in Hollywood, like actress, singer, model, all of that. And then, you know, you grow up a little, and it, what I truly wish to be in Hollywood, I don't know. I feel like it'd be cool, but at the same time, I feel like Hollywood is crazy, and especially because of the time, obviously, when you're little, you just want to do it right away. So you're like becoming a child star. I feel like that is always a little bit of a worrying moment. I don't know. That's not the topic of this anyway, but back to why I wanted to start this podcast. So I was thinking on all of those things, and I was like, I've had YouTube channels in the past, and that has never really felt like the right avenue for me. So, what is something similar? Because I definitely still enjoy the concept of that, and I enjoy like the video side of things. But I also felt that it would be nice for me to have a more audio focused rather than visual focused. And that's not to say that there isn't visual formats, because there clearly is. If you're watching this on YouTube, like it's a video, and I think it'll be posted in video format on Spotify as well if I can figure out how to do that, which we'll be back to that in a second. But like it's an interesting thing to me, both the video and the audio side of it. And in like when I was little, I was very talkative, which like if you met me now, you probably wouldn't think, because I don't really talk all that much. But when I was little, I was very like I would talk to anybody about anything at any time. You get the vibe? You get the vibe. But I think just overall, when I was younger, I was a much more outgoing, fun loving, um, talkative kid. And then as I got older, and especially around like COVID, I got a lot more anxious and not necessarily antisocial, but just like the vibe of walking up to someone and just starting a conversation. Like I was a lot more anxious surrounding that. That's not to say that I like won't do that, but it's a lot more. It feels a lot more awkward on my end to like try and start a conversation with somebody that I don't know, and like that sort of thing, than it did when I was little. And so I think I just ended up talking a lot less as I got older. And that, I mean, it's not necessarily like a horrible thing. Like, I can still function, I can still talk to people. But it also meant that, especially around the time of like COVID, um, I just, I started having a lot more conversations in my head rather than with other people. And I think that having this like space to talk and just say things out loud will be like it'll be good for me. You know what I mean? Like I think it'll be a nice space, creative outlet to just kind of talk through things. Um so yeah, let's transition a little bit and go from why I started a podcast to what I would like for the future of this podcast. So overall, I think eventually I would like to shift into a more interview style rather than a solo style, just because I feel like that is a more sustainable method for this. I have things going on in my life, but as much as I love just sitting and talking to a camera, I think it'd be nice to also have another person to talk with. So eventually, I would like to uh, get it to a more interview style. And in my wildest dreams, I would be like a more like journalist type thing. And I would get to like talk to people from all walks of life and those sorts of things. Realistically, this is probably going to be just like a space where I sit and I talk with my friends, and we talk about drama or whatever is going on that we find interesting, and like those sorts of things. But in my wildest dreams, that would be where the future of the podcast is. And I think not only is that like my like crazy dream about the podcast. I also think that's my more like wild dream regarding my life in general. Currently, I am having a bit of an internal battle between several different things regarding like college majors and stuff. I thought I had it figured out, and I thought I wanted to study chemistry, but and I do genuinely have a love for chemistry, and I don't want to ignore that and write that off, because that is still definitely something that I have an interest in and I care about and want to learn more about. But I also think that I would love to study like communications and journalism and like those sorts of things, because like I would love to eventually, like, if money didn't matter, I would pursue being like a journalist for some form of my interest, whether that be like this in a more like podcasty interview style, or the hope of like being like a sports journalist for like F1 or one of the other, or another sport that I find interesting. Like those sorts of things, like I would love, in like a dream world, that is what I would do. But being more realistic, it would be much more difficult to find a consistent and reasonable like salary and that sort of thing. So, you know, chemistry is probably the safer bet, but I do genuinely have a love for it, and I don't want to say that like it's my, like, some people will say like, oh, it's my heart versus my head when they're trying to decide what they want to do, and like they have a passion and something else that seems more realistic. I genuinely have a love for both forms of thing, which has led me to consider like double majoring and stuff like that. But a lot of colleges that focus on chemistry and are a lot more science oriented and a lot less of a focus on journalism and the more creative type majors, creative and communications, I guess you should say. But I don't know. It's a thing to think about, and I'll probably end up talking about it more in another episode, because going into my senior year of high school, I think that's a thing that I'm going to end up talking about a lot, is college and trying to find a path for my future and all those sorts of things. So you'll probably be sick of hearing me talk about it eventually, but that's probably something that will come back in the future. Another thing that I want to come back in the future is I want to set up a segment every episode, as the name of the podcast is Everyone Feels Stupid. I want to do a segment every episode where I talk about something recently that has made me feel stupid. Although I guess I should probably say why I named the podcast Everyone Feels Stupid before I get to that. So stay tuned if you want to hear about why I feel stupid. Let's go into why I chose to name the podcast this way. So when I finally settled on starting a podcast, obviously the name was one of the first things that I knew I had to figure out. So I sat down and I started like thinking through what are things that are like interesting about me and is something that I could take and stylize and make my own and like turn into a brand, essentially. Because that's what a lot of, because obviously, like, and if you want anything to go anywhere, you have to be able to market it. And you don't want, if you want to be able to market something, you have to make it distinct. It can't be what everything else is. So I was like, okay, so what's different about me than anybody else? And it's not. And so I was like, it's not necessarily that I wanted it to be different, but I just knew that I had to find something that was different enough that I could market it, essentially. So I started thinking about, okay, well, I'm 17, I'm in high school, I'm going to be a senior, like that's pretty standard. What about me and my teenage years is different? And so I settled on thinking that the thing that's the most defining as me being different than anyone else would be getting diagnosed with multiple chronic illnesses. And it, like, not to say that I'm the only teenager who's chronically ill, because I'm definitely not, but it is like most teenagers don't have to deal with some form of chronic illness, so that is something that's different. And so I started thinking about, okay, my diagnosis and all the things that came across with that. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me the most is just the emotional turmoil that comes with getting a diagnosis, because receiving like an official diagnosis was simultaneously both like a very rewarding thing and also a very like isolating thing. Like, I'm very lucky to have received my diagnosis when I did and gotten the specialist that I needed to see, because I'm very lucky that I had specialists in my area, and like I have to drive like 15 minutes to the doctor, and others have to drive hours, take flights to get to where they need to be, all those sorts of things. Like, I'm very lucky to be located where I am and around the specialists that can help me. But it's also like, and I very much so appreciated finally having answers, but along with having those answers also comes a very like ice, like you begin to feel different or othered by this diagnosis. And it can be, if you aren't trying to find a way to relate to everybody, it can be a very isolating thing. And so I have, for a while after my diagnosis, I struggled with it mentally, finding peace with that. And so what I eventually challenged myself to do was to find ways to relate to everybody around me, to show that even though I was, different, I was still similar to everyone else. And so through that, um, I essentially just started looking for traits that I shared with anyone else around me. And so, if someone else is a fear of spiders, I put that in my brain as like, oh, they're like me. Or if we had the same favorite color, oh, they're like me. And through all of those things, I started to form one big realization, and that is that at the end of the day, no one knows what they're doing. Everyone's confused. Everyone's trying to figure out who they are, who they want to be, where they're going, where they've been, all that stuff. Like, no one has it figured out, and everyone feels stupid. So that is how I came up with the name of the podcast, which, now saying the name of the podcast, it makes me think about the fact that I spent the whole time trying to figure out how to market it as being different from other podcasts, and it is in fact a big podcast about how everyone's the same. But it's okay, because I think a message about how we're all more alike than we realize is something a little different. You know? I don't know. You get the vibe. You get the vibe. But yeah, so transitioning back to the original segment I wanted to talk about, through this podcast, I want to include things that made me feel stupid. That way, anyone that's listening, if you're having a moment where you feel stupid, you can know that someone out there can relate. So I recently obviously had to set up all of like the social media and all of those things, and through that I felt very stupid, because I designed my own logo and stuff, logo and like channel banner for YouTube, and I thought going into making those that I was gonna, whip it up right away and it would take me like 20-ish minutes for each. No, no. I spent like 3 days designing my logo, because I had like so many different versions, and I had no clue what I wanted it to look like and all these things. I was trying to figure it out, and I spent like 3 different days before I finally settled on the one that I picked. And then I had to like make my channel banner for YouTube, and that, I think, I made that one after, so I have more like color scheme and the vibe settled, and so that one only took me, I think, like one day. But man, did I feel stupid at first. Like, I thought this was gonna be a quick little thing. I was gonna get it done in like a couple hours, like spend an hour on the logo and then like an hour on the channel banner, and it'd be done and it'd be good, and I could move on and start focusing on like other aspects. Nope, nope, nope. Um, yeah, I definitely felt a little stupid after that. And it also, I had to like set up my like Spotify account, like Spotify for creators, and I realized I didn't realize all of the steps that were going to be involved in making the podcast and making the podcast work, and that definitely made me feel stupid afterwards. So I was like, okay, like this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Nothing that I can't like handle, but it was just definitely a lot more intense than I thought it was going to be. And that made me feel a little stupid because I should realize that like running a channel is not going to be a walk in the park or whatever the saying is, you know what I mean? So that is for that segment for today. So I've established why I wanted to start the podcast, the name of the podcast, all that stuff. I think I want to go into a little bit of like the inspirations for the podcast, just so you can kind of get a general gist of what the vibe moving forward is going to be more like, because I feel like this episode isn't necessarily going to be a good example of what the podcast is hopefully going to become, because obviously like, this is just trying to establish who I am, what I care about, all those sorts of things. So a lot of my inspirations for this are like chicken shop date, like YouTube video essay, and then like if anyone is familiar with like the WCHS old like audio visual club, like their videos, kind of that sort of vibe, but also like I'm sure I'm gonna take inspiration from like YouTube channels that I grew up watching or I watch currently. So like I would love to have like videos where I talk about like media and like sports and those sorts of things that I care about. So like I grew up watching like film and like game theory, and then like the Super Carlin Brothers channel, like so like those sorts of things where I talk about media that I've watched and like thoughts I have on those sorts of things. And then more recently I've watched like um video essays either talking about media or just like social commentary. So like channels like Kian Carlisle and like Funky Frog Bait, like those are ones that I've been watching more recently that I think have really interesting takes on, like old nostalgic things that we like channels, Disney Channel stuff, or like just generally like where how like the world is set up. I think those are very interesting. I am a huge F1 fan, so I've been watching channels like Dan No Skill and Rick's F1 Addiction. Those are both really cool. And then like general like content that I also grew up on like Jaden Animations and her sorts of videos where like they have a lot of like comedy in them. So I'd love to be able to incorporate some more of that into how I do, which I think having another person here would help me kind of bounce off and be a little funnier, because I can make a couple jokes, but I don't think anyone's laughing. So, and then I also would love to incorporate like the comedy and um, that like Dylan is in trouble in his other channel, Ooga Booga, like those sorts of vibe. I think that is also really fun. Um, yeah, those are some of like the uh, inspirations I've had, which is ultimately why I also wanted to film this visually and then upload to YouTube as well, because a lot of my inspirations are um, more YouTube based. And that's not to say that I don't have inspirations that are um, like podcast vibes, but I think a lot of podcasts that I listen to are podcasts where there's some sort of like gimmick, or they were started by someone who's already well established in the industry, and I'm clearly not. So like I listen to like Back to the Bar, and what's the name of the other one? Like there's the one that, oh, I can't think of her name. She played the she was in Parks and Rec. I'll put a picture for my um visual viewers. I don't know. I don't remember her name, but she has a podcast, and I listen to that one sometimes with my mom. I've listened to Ear Biscuits by from like the Rhett and Link from Good Mythical Morning. Um, and it's not to say that I don't listen to podcasts to people that aren't already like established creators, but like because I've but a lot of them are have at least a background in like YouTube or movies or something like that. I don't know. I feel like podcasts are simultaneously like a oversaturated and very undersaturated market. I feel like there's some parts of podcasts that like some styles that are very oversaturated. I feel like the like solo vibe is definitely um less of a saturated market, and so that's why I wanted to like host this by myself. But I also like I love more of the interview style vibe, which is definitely more of a like there's lots of people with interview style podcasts, which is why I think not every episode is going to be that way, but um I do really enjoy those styles, and I think that is more of like my dream vibe for this. So eventually it probably will shuffle off in that direction, but I do still want to do like lots of episodes where I am, by myself talking through things, and I have ideas for those, but no spoilers because I don't even know if they'll all work out. Like I said, it took me like 5 different recordings to finally settle on one for this first episode, so who knows if my initial ideas for the other episodes are even going to work out. And I also have no real like schedule set up for recording. I'm going to do it when I can. I'm going to edit when I can, but I don't want to try and say, oh, I'll have episodes up every week or every 2 weeks or whatever, because like I've said, I'm a chronically ill teenager who's going to be a senior in high school and has lots of activities going on. So I don't want to, at this point, try and say how long or how frequently episodes are going to be coming out, because especially with some of the conditions I have, like I have POTS or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which I am managing much better than I have been in the past, but that's not to say that I don't still experience flare up and symptoms, and it would be, very uncomfortable to try and record during a flare. My brain fog is usually pretty intense when I'm in a flare, and so I wouldn't really know what I was saying anyway. So that probably wouldn't be a great fit. And then I also have, well, we think I have GERD or gastroesophageal reflux disease, which is essentially chronic acid reflux for those that don't know. And it just basically, stomach acid likes to be anywhere that is not my stomach. And so it'll come up my throat and stuff, which can make talking very painful. So I don't want to try and like claim, oh, I'm going to record on this day when my reflux might be horrible. And sometimes it is to the point where talking makes me want to cry. And so, like, I don't want to force myself to try and fit a schedule that might not always work for me. And so that is why I don't want to claim any sort of schedule too early on. I'm sure eventually, once I kind of find my groove, I might be able to set a schedule. But at this point, especially with this summer coming to an end, and school about to start back up, I don't know how much free time I'm going to have. I have my part-time job at Taco Bell. I'll have a full school days worth of classes and homework to deal with. So I don't want to set up expectations that I can't follow through on, essentially. But yeah, that's not to say that the podcast is going away, because it's going to stay. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to find the time, and I'm not just going to ditch it like I have with many a YouTube channel in the past, but it might just be a little bit more random regarding uploads and stuff for the time being. And then eventually I'll probably settle into more of a schedule. But yeah, I think that is most of the stuff I wanted to say and get across. This episode is probably going to be shorter than a lot of the ones that I will end up doing eventually, just because I just kind of wanted to talk through some of those sorts of things, and then moving forward is when I'll start, doing more of the let's talk about life things and all that sort of stuff. But I kind of wanted to just set up, bit of background and those sorts of things, and then allow it to jump off and just start talking from here on out. So I think that is where I'm going to end it today. And just remember that everyone feels stupid. Bye.